The galaxy dreams in red. It is the color of dying suns, burning themselves to cinders as their light stretches thin across the void. It is the color of crumbling empires, of banners once bright, now tattered and soaked in the memories of wars no longer sung. It is the color of the thirst, that unquenchable hunger that whispers through the blood of Baileys. The stars themselves seem dimmer now. There was a time when their light burned fierce, when the empire of Baalis strode across the galaxy, as if it were the will of the heavens made manifest. But empires are not eternal. They rot long before their thrones collapse, eaten away not by the enemies that circle them, but by the sins festering at their core. And here, upon the throne of crimson stone, Lord Commander Sareth watches it all, the ruin, the dying light, the slow decay of a dream he once bled for. His armor, gold once, has dulled with age. His eyes, sharpened by centuries of war, see only the weight of what is slipping away. Here we turn to you, the listener. Before we begin, know this. Your presence here matters to me. In this great void of stories, I am glad you found your way to this one. We truly love and care for you. And now, before we dive deeper into the ruin of Baileys, tell us, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there? Go on, I'll wait. Now, take a breath. Grab your coffee. Let us begin. The story folds back into the galaxy. Baalis once reigned as the beating heart of the Crimson Imperium. Fleets bearing the mark of the blooded sun carved their dominion from the unclaimed dark. Planets bent the knee in awe, their skies bright with the fire of victory. And at the head of it all, Sareth, the unbroken spear, the one they said could not fall. But now the throne feels heavier than any weapon. The Council of Blood grows restless, whispers of schism slipping through the marble halls. Entire sectors have grown cold in their loyalty, and rumors creep from the deep void. Kaelin's fleets are slow to answer summons. Morwyn's chaplains mutter of omens they dare not speak aloud, and Loiron, old, calculating Lyron, has locked himself away with relics older than the Empire itself. Yet none of this chills Sareth as much as the silence within his own heart. There was a time when the glory of the blooded sun filled him with fire. Now he feels the echo of something else, a hunger beneath his skin. At first it was no more than a shadow, a fleeting thirst in battle. But lately it has grown, the red thirst. Every commander knows the stories, whispers that the Empire's founders bargained with something ancient to secure their strength. Most treat it as a myth, a curse used to frighten initiates. But Sareth feels it now, gnawing at him. In the silence of the throne room, in the still moments between wars, he can almost hear it breathing. He rises, the sound of his armor echoing through the chamber. The throne of crimson stone looms behind him, carved from the remains of a starship lost in the earliest wars of the Empire. The stained glass above throws lines of red across his armor, painting him in the color of his curse. Outside, Baalis hangs heavy in its slow orbit around a dying sun. The sky burns faintly crimson at the horizon, as if the world itself knows what is to come. In the distance, the fortress spire, the heart of the Empire's fleet command, glitters with activity. Fleets are mustering, though for what purpose, Sareth cannot yet know. Lord Commander, comes the voice of Morwyn, heavy with the weight of reverence and doubt. The chaplain steps into the throne room, helm beneath his arm, the black robes of his office whispering against the stone. His eyes are deep, troubled. The omens grow darker. The stars themselves bleed. This is not a silence we should ignore. Sareth turns, studying the man who has stood beside him through wars beyond count. Omens, he says, voice low. more to himself than to Morwen. Always omens, and never the truth. Morwen hesitates, then steps closer. Perhaps the truth is what we fear most. There are whispers in the deep vaults, relics from the First Crusade. They speak of the thirst, not as a curse to be endured, but as a shadow that will consume the Empire from within. Sareth's jaw tightens. Lirin's name hovers in the silence between them, though neither man speaks it. The old scholar has long kept secrets too dangerous for open counsel. "I will speak with him," Sareth says at last, though the weight in his voice suggests he already knows the conversation will not bring comfort. Morwen bows slightly. "Then you will hear more than you wish, my lord, and perhaps see what you have long refused to see." The chaplain's footsteps fade into the corridor, leaving Sareth alone again with the silence. For a long moment, he stands before the great stained glass, watching the light shift as the sun moves. The red thirst coils within him, and for just an instant he wonders if Morwen is right, that this is not a curse laid upon the Empire, but the very heart of it. Far beyond the walls of the throne room, fleets gather. Kaelin's banners have not yet returned from the Syndral expanse. The outer worlds have begun to murmur of independence. And here, in the very heart of the Crimson Imperium, the foundations feel as though they are beginning to crack. Sareth turns from the window, the weight of command pressing down on him. The galaxy outside does not care for omens or curses. It moves ever forward, indifferent to the fall of empires. But Sareth cannot shake the feeling that the end has already begun, and that it will not come from without, but from the loyalty of those closest to him. In the deep silence of the throne room, the red thirst stirs. The court of Balis was a cathedral of war. Black marble floors reflected the light of towering flame braziers, their smoke curling into a high ceiling painted with scenes of conquest long past. Once, this hall had echoed with triumph, each victory feeding the dream of the Crimson Imperium. Now its shadows were longer, and the voices that filled it spoke in measured tones, every word a test of loyalty, every silence an accusation. Lord Commander Sareth strode between the ranks of his assembled captains, their armor polished to a mirror's sheen, their eyes as sharp as the blades at their belts. Each one bowed as he passed, but the deference felt brittle. The red thirst coiled in the air here too, unspoken but palpable. At the foot of the blooded sun standard, Kaelin knelt. His armor gleamed crimson and gold, a reflection of the Empire's glory days, though the man within seemed forged of harder steel. He was the Empire's favored son, the youngest to command a fleet, the one soldiers whispered would succeed Sareth when the time came. His smile was a weapon, his loyalty a promise with edges. "My Lord Commander," Kaelin said, rising smoothly, "the Syndral expanse bows to your will. The rebellious governors have been persuaded." His words were formal, but there was a spark in his voice that Sareth could not ignore, a subtle claim to the victory as his own. Sareth studied him in silence. Kaelin had returned quickly, perhaps too quickly. "And yet," Sareth said at last, "the reports say 3 of our ships were lost without record. An efficient campaign does not discard resources so lightly." A flicker, barely a shadow, passed through Kaelin's expression. "A necessary sacrifice. There are elements within the fleet that resist unity. I have taken steps to ensure they will no longer disrupt the chain of command." From the far side of the hall, a low voice cut through the tension. "Or perhaps you have taken steps to ensure the chain of command bends to you." Morwen, the chaplain, stepped forward from the shadows of the great pillars. His black armor was unadorned, his presence as heavy as the void. He had never trusted Kaelin, and in moments like this, made no effort to conceal it. Kaelin turned slightly, a smile still painted on his lips, though his eyes had hardened. "Faithful Morwen," he said, almost warmly. "Ever watchful, ever cautious. Your counsel is invaluable, though perhaps at times overly burdened with suspicion." Morwen's reply was a blade wrapped in prayer. "Suspicion is the duty of the faithful when pride begins to wear the crown." The hall went still. Sareth raised a hand, not in anger, but in weary command. "Enough. This is not the place for quarrels. There will be time to weigh truth and intent." Behind the captains, a figure stepped forward with quiet gravity. Lorraine, the scholar, was a relic of the First Crusade himself, his armor more ceremony than function, his hands clasped around a staff of old black steel. His voice was low, yet carried to every corner of the hall. "My Lord Commander, while we stand in this chamber, trading words, the omens grow darker. The red thirst spreads more swiftly. I have seen signs that disturb me." His pale eyes shifted toward Kaelin, then back to Sareth. "There are currents beneath the surface of this empire, unseen but strong. If we do not act, they will pull us under." Kaelin inclined his head, but there was no humility in the gesture. "And what do you suggest, old friend? That we lock ourselves away in your vaults of dust and superstition? The Empire stands because we act, not because we fear shadows." Liren's gaze was sharp for all its age. "It is not shadows I fear, Commander. It is what grows within the light." Sareth's voice broke through the tension like a slow blade. "Enough. Kaelin, you will provide a full report of the Sindral campaign. Morwen, you will review it and bring your concerns to me directly. Liren, you and I will speak tonight in the vault. Alone." There was a faint shift in the air at those last words, like the first tremor before a storm. The court bowed, though not all with the same measure of loyalty. As the captains began to disperse, Kaelin lingered at the edge of the chamber. His eyes met Sareth's, and for a moment there was no deference, no mask. Only something hard, something that spoke of inevitability. Then he bowed sharply and turned away. Morwen was the next to approach, his voice low enough that it would not carry. "He is dangerous, my lord. His ambition is not hidden as he believes. He wins loyalty with victories and promises of a stronger empire. If you will not act, he will." Sareth's gaze was fixed on the great stained glass above, the blood-red light spilling across the floor. "I know," he said simply, "and yet, the Empire needs him. For now." Morwen hesitated, then bowed his head in resignation. "For now, then, but not forever." The hall emptied, leaving Sareth alone once more in the great chamber. The red thirst whispered faintly at the edge of his mind, as if feeding on the tension. He turned from the silent banners toward the deep halls below. The vault waited. The descent into the vault was a ritual in itself. The stairs wound deep beneath the throne of crimson stone, past layers of the fortress older than the Empire's name. The air grew colder, heavier, until the only sound was the steady echo of his boots on stone. At the vault's heart, Liren waited. The old scholar stood before a door of black steel, carved with symbols older than the Imperium, his staff resting lightly at his side. His face was drawn, pale, his eyes heavy with truths too long kept. "You feel it, don't you?" Liren said quietly as Sareth approached. "The hunger, the way it gnaws at you more each year. It is not battle that feeds it, but something deeper." Sareth stopped before him, the shadows stretching long. "You speak as though you know what it is." "I do," Liren replied. and I know what it will cost to end it." He turned, placing his hand upon the black steel. Slowly, the surface rippled like water, revealing faint shapes beneath. Blades, armor, and something darker, coiled like a sleeping serpent. "This vault," Liren continued, "holds relics from before the Empire's birth. They are the heart of the thirst, its seed and its chain. To open it is to confront the truth. But truth is never gentle." Sareth's hand hovered above the door, the cold radiating into his armor. Behind him, the Empire strained under its own weight. Kaelin's ambition, Morwen's warnings, the restless worlds at the edge of loyalty. He withdrew his hand. "Not tonight." Liren's eyes narrowed faintly, but he bowed. "Truth waits, my lord. It always does." As Sareth turned to leave, the vault door shivered, as though something within had stirred at his presence. The sound followed him back up the long stair, faint but unending. In the silent throne room above, the red thirst was waiting. The days after the court of Balis grew long, each hour heavy with silence. It was the kind of silence that was not peace, but the stillness before something breaks. Rumors clung to the palace like a sickness, whispers of Kaelin's campaign in the Syndral expanse, of ships that never returned, of captains who swore loyalty to him alone. The stories were quiet, spoken in dark corners, but Sareth felt their weight in every council meeting. Morwen felt it too. The chaplain stood at the edge of the throne room during each assembly, a black shadow among crimson banners, his eyes sharp and watchful. His faith was not the kind that softened. His devotion made him dangerous, unyielding in the face of ambition he believed would consume the Empire. And Kaelin was nowhere to be seen. He had departed again with his fleet, citing urgent patrols at the Empire's edge. No orders from Sareth had been given for such a mission. The Lord Commander allowed it, outwardly calm, though within him the unease grew like a slow-burning ember. In the echoing chamber of the chapel, Morwen knelt before the altar. It was a place older than the throne itself, carved into the bones of the fortress in an age when the Empire had still believed its strength divine. Stained glass filtered dying light across the black stone floor, the red of the blooded sun pooling like liquid across his armor. "Faith is not in banners or thrones," he murmured, his voice almost lost in the still air. "Faith is in vigilance, in the refusal to turn from truth, no matter how dark." A faint echo stirred in the shadows behind him. "Truth," came a voice, rich with irony, "is rarely what the faithful believe it to be." Morwen rose to his feet, hand tightening on the haft of his crozius. Liren emerged from the darkness, his pale face calm, his eyes unreadable. "You move quietly for one so loud in council," Morwen said. "I move as I must," Liren replied. "There are things beneath this fortress you have not seen, chaplain. Things the Lord Commander has not yet chosen to see. And Kaelin..." His voice drifted, though there was a weight in the way he spoke the name. "Kaelin is not blind to them. He seeks power that does not belong to him." Morwen's jaw tightened. "Then speak plainly. What power?" Liren's gaze was sharp as glass. "The same power that feeds the red thirst. It does not sleep as we do. It calls to those who will listen. And Kaelin listens." The words lingered like a curse. Afar beyond the walls of Balis, Kaelin's fleet drifted in the black. The Syndral expanse lay before them, a vast stretch of starless void broken by the shattered husks of ancient ships. Relics of wars so old even Lyran's records spoke of them in fragments. Kaelin stood upon the bridge of his flagship, the vigilant flame, his eyes fixed on a distant shape. A derelict fortress ship, its broken hull glimmering faintly as though something within still lived. "Approach," he ordered, his voice calm. His captains hesitated, unease flickering across their faces. "My lord, the fortress is dead. No signals, no power." Kalen smiled faintly. "And yet it waits. Do as I command." The fleet moved in silence. As they drew close, the broken fortress loomed larger, its surface etched with strange, twisting marks, its hangar gates gaping like the mouth of a beast. Kalen's eyes narrowed. He could feel it, even from here. The pull, the whisper. He turned to his second, Captain Vale. "Prepare a boarding party. Only my chosen will enter." Back on Balis, the tension grew sharper. Reports from the border spoke of Kalen's fleets moving in strange patterns, disappearing for days, then reappearing near abandoned systems. Morwen brought the data to Sareth, the chaplain's voice hard with certainty. "He hides something," Morwen said. "No commander takes his ships so far from the lanes without purpose, and his purpose is not yours, my lord." Sareth sat upon the throne of crimson stone, the light of the dying sun bleeding across his armor. He did not look at Morwen, his gaze fixed on the horizon beyond the stained glass. "And what would you have me do?" Sareth asked quietly. "Recall him? Accuse him before the court without proof? His victories keep the outer worlds from rising. The Empire still speaks his name with loyalty." "Loyalty is a tide," Morwen said. "It changes with the wind, and Kalen is the wind they follow." Sareth's hand tightened on the arm of the throne. He had known this moment was coming. The Empire was a blade balanced on the edge of trust, and trust, once broken, could never be reforged. In the deep vault, Liren worked alone. The black steel door shivered faintly, the runes carved into its surface glowing like embers. The relics within whispered at the edge of hearing, their voices a chorus of hunger and promise. Liren's hands traced the patterns of the wards, strengthening them, though each seal seemed harder to maintain than the last. He paused, his old eyes narrowing. Somewhere far beyond the fortress walls, the relics shifted, not in the vault, but elsewhere. His thoughts turned, inevitably, to Kalen. So the vigilant flame burned silently above the derelict fortress ship. Kalen stepped into the dark, his chosen warriors close behind. The air was cold, heavy with the dust of centuries. Symbols older than the Empire covered the walls, their meaning lost, but their presence undeniable. At the heart of the fortress, Kalen found what he had come for. A chamber of black stone, its floor carved with the same runes as Liren's vault. In its center stood a great sarcophagus, bound in chains of gold and steel, the metal worn thin with age. Kalen approached slowly, his hand brushing the surface. A voice, not sound, but thought, rose within him. "I know you." He smiled faintly. "Then you know why I am here." The voice was silent for a long moment. Then, "I can give you what you seek. Power. Victory. The empire that is yours by right." Kalen's eyes glimmered in the dark. "And the cost?" "Everything," the voice whispered. Kalen's smile did not falter. On Balis, Sareth stood alone in the throne room. The dying sun bled across the glass, painting the floor in gold and crimson. The red thirst pulsed faintly in his veins, stronger now than ever before. Somewhere in the void, Kalen's hand had already closed around the future of the Empire, and Sareth could feel it. The court of Balis was restless. The great banners of the blooded sun still hung in their place, but they seemed heavier now, as though the air itself pressed down upon them. Word of Kalen's latest victories had returned ahead of him, carried by envoys and whispers alike. He had crushed a rebellion in the far rifts, restored order to a drifting fortress world, and secured the allegiance of 3 rogue governors, without any direct orders from Sareth. Such victories could not be ignored, but neither could the silence that surrounded them. The great hall filled slowly. Captains in crimson armor lined the walls, the murmured conversations sharp beneath the vaulted ceiling. The throne at the far end remained empty for the moment. It was not the absence of Sareth that drew their unease. It was the expectation of Kaelin's arrival. When he came, it was not as a humble commander reporting to his lord. The doors swung wide, and Kaelin strode in with the measured confidence of a man who already knew the court's eyes belonged to him. His armor gleamed as though fresh from the forge, the crimson enamel polished to a mirror finish. Behind him, his chosen captains followed, their presence a statement in itself. The hall bowed, not all deeply, not all to Sareth. From the dais, Sareth watched in silence. He had taken the throne before Kaelin's arrival, the light of the dying sun pouring through the stained glass behind him. His armor was less bright than Kaelin's, but the weight it carried was older, heavier, like the Empire itself. His gaze did not waver as Kaelin approached. "My Lord Commander," Kaelin said, bowing smoothly. "The far rifts are secure. The outer worlds hold their loyalty, for now." Sareth's voice was even, but there was no warmth in it. For now, Kaelin allowed himself a faint smile. Loyalty must be cultivated. The governors required certain assurances. Morwen, standing to Sareth's right, spoke before the Lord Commander could reply. "Assurances, or promises you have no authority to make." Kaelin turned his head slightly, his tone still calm. "Promises made in service to the Empire are no less binding for their origin, Chaplain. The outer worlds are stable. Would you prefer they rise in rebellion while we debate the purity of our methods?" A murmur ran through the hall. Some nodded at Kaelin's words. Others shifted uneasily. Sareth raised a hand for silence. "We will review your agreements in council. What was promised will be honored if it serves the Empire." His gaze lingered on Kaelin. No promise is greater than its cost. Kaelin bowed again, though his eyes did not leave Sareth's. "As you will, my lord." Later, in the council chamber, the debate turned sharper. Around the black marble table sat the key voices of the Empire. Morwen, grim and unyielding. Lyran, silent and calculating. And Kaelin, whose presence dominated even without words. "The far rifts are quiet because I acted decisively," Kaelin said, his voice cutting through the tension. "The outer worlds follow strength. They will not wait for endless deliberation." Morwen's voice was iron. "They follow loyalty, not ambition. Strength without loyalty is the seed of treachery." Kaelin's smile was faint, but it carried weight. "And loyalty without strength is the seed of collapse." The two men's voices clashed like blades, but Sareth spoke before it could escalate further. "Enough. The outer worlds are quiet, but at a cost we will review. Kaelin, your actions have kept the border from breaking, but you will answer for every promise made in the Empire's name." Kaelin inclined his head, but there was no defeat in the gesture. "As you command." That night, Morwen sought Sareth in the quiet of the throne room. "The court listens to him more each day," the chaplain said, his voice low. "Every victory he brings tightens his hold on their loyalty. Soon it will not matter what orders you give. They will follow him." Sareth's gaze was fixed on the horizon beyond the stained glass. "I know." "Then act," Morwen urged. "Recall him. Strip his command before his shadow grows longer than the throne's light." Sareth turned to face him. "And if I do?" The outer worlds will see. Urge a division, weakness. The Empire cannot survive civil war. Morwen's jaw tightened. The Empire will not survive Kaelin's ambition either. Sareth did not answer. Far from Balis, Kaelin's chosen captains met in a chamber aboard the Vigilant Flame. Maps of the Empire glowed faintly across the table, red lines marking supply routes, hidden strongholds, and isolated fortresses. Kaelin stood at the head, his expression calm. "The Lord Commander grows cautious," he said. "Caution is the language of decline. We will not decline." One of his captains hesitated. "My lord, you speak as though the throne is already yours." Kaelin's smile was faint. "The throne belongs to whoever can hold it, and I will hold it, for the Empire." Back on Balis, Liren stood alone in the vault. The black steel door pulsed faintly, as though something within stirred more strongly now. The scholar's eyes narrowed. "Kaelin," he murmured, "you've touched something you do not understand." The runes glowed faintly, and for just an instant a voice whispered back. In the throne room above, Sareth sat in silence. The court was divided. His captains were restless. The red thirst burned faintly in his veins, stronger each day, and far away, Kaelin's shadow grew longer. The news came like a wound. 3 worlds on the outer rim, Athros, Veyrin, and Calyx, had risen in open rebellion. Their banners had been stripped from the fortress walls, replaced by the sigils of independence. Fleets loyal to the Crimson Imperium were driven back from orbit. Communications from the surface spoke of purges, executions, and vows, never again to kneel before Balis. It was not the first rebellion in the Empire's history, but it was the first that came so soon after Kaelin's victories. In the High Council chamber, the voices of Sareth's captains rang like steel on steel. "They act because they believe the Empire weak," one captain spat. "Because we argue here while Kaelin wins battles without you, my lord." "They act because Kaelin promised them peace," Morwen cut in, his voice hard. "Peace he cannot give while feeding his own ambition." "They act," another captain said carefully, "because they see an empire divided." Sareth sat at the head of the table, silent until the voices fell to uneasy quiet. His eyes were shadowed by the weight of command. "The outer worlds will be answered," he said at last. "Not with delay, not with division. The Crimson Imperium does not bleed quietly." And the order was given. Fleet banners were raised from the fortress spire, their crimson light blazing across Balis' sky. Warships rumbled to life in the deep docks, their hulls humming with the promise of battle. Across the Empire, the call to arms echoed. Kaelin returned to the throne room before the fleets departed, his armor gleaming with the dust of distant campaigns. His bow to Sareth was deep enough for the court to see, but his voice was measured for the captain's ears. "My lord," he said, "the outer worlds know me. They have fought beside me. Their rebellion will falter if I speak to them, not as their conqueror, but as their ally." Sareth's gaze narrowed. "And will they bow to the Empire? Or to you?" Kaelin smiled faintly. "To the Empire, my lord, as they always have." Morwen's eyes were sharp as he stepped forward. "You cannot trust him with this command." Sareth looked between them, Kaelin confident and unyielding, Morwen grim and certain. The choice was no choice at all. The rebellion had to be answered, and only Kaelin had the loyalty of the men who would fight it. "You will lead the fleet," Sareth said at last. His words rang through the hall. "But the victory will be the Empire's, not yours alone." Kaelin bowed again, though there was a glimmer in his eyes that spoke of more than obedience. The fleet departed in a blaze of crimson light. From the highest tower of the fortress spire, Sareth watched the warships vanish into the dark. Morwen stood at his side, his voice low. "You have given him the weapon he needs to strike at you," the chaplain said. "I have given him the weapon the Empire needs to survive," Sareth replied. "If I deny him, I weaken the Empire. If I trust him, I risk its future. There is no path without cost." "Then you must be ready to pay it," Morwen said. Far across the void, Kaelin's fleet burned toward Athros. On the bridge of the vigilant flame, his chosen captains gathered around the command dais. The rebellion's fleets were weaker than expected, their formations scattered and disorganized. "They are not ready for us," Vale said. Kaelin's eyes narrowed. "They are exactly as ready as I intended." The captains glanced at each other, uncertain, but no one spoke. Back on Balis, Lirin moved through the vault. The black steel door shivered more violently now, its runes pulsing in rhythm with some distant heartbeat. His fingers traced the wards, reinforcing them, but the resistance grew stronger on each day. "You feel it, don't you?" he murmured. "The hunger, the pull. It is stronger now, because it is being fed." In the still air of the vault, the whisper came again, not in words, but in feeling. A shadow of ambition, a promise of power, a name, Kaelin. Lirin's eyes hardened. The battle for Ethros burned bright and brief. Kaelin's fleet swept aside the rebellion's scattered defenders. His ships descended upon the planetary strongholds, their guns silencing the resistance within days. Yet Kaelin's orders were precise. Cities that resisted were brought to ruin, but those that surrendered were spared. His proclamations spoke not of the throne on Balis, but of his own word as their protector. By the time the world's banners were restored, they bore both the sigil of the blooded sun and the emblem of Kaelin's personal fleet. The same pattern followed on Veyrin and Calix. On Balis, the news was met with uneasy celebration. The outer worlds had returned to the Empire. The rebellion had been crushed. But the reports carried Kaelin's name as often as Sareth's. His victories filled the mouths of soldiers and citizens alike. In the throne room, Morwen spoke without ceremony. "This is not loyalty to the Empire," he said. "It is loyalty to Kaelin. Every battle he fights strengthens his claim. Every world he restores bends to his will." Sareth said nothing. The red thirst whispered faintly beneath his skin, stronger than ever. Kaelin returned to Balis in triumph. The court gathered to greet him, banners unfurled. The great hall filled with the thunder of armor and applause. Kaelin walked through the crowd with measured steps, bowing deeply to Sareth upon the dais. "My lord," he said, "the outer worlds are yours again." Sareth's gaze met his. "And yet they speak your name louder than mine." Kaelin's smile was faint. "The Empire speaks of victory. Does it matter whose voice carries it?" Morwen's voice was iron. "It matters more than you know." Kaelin's eyes lingered on the chaplain. Then he bowed once more to Sareth. "As you will, my lord." The court watched in silence, and the shadow of division deepened. That night, in the vault, the black steel door trembled. Lirin stood before it, his voice low. "The Empire is breaking," he whispered to the unseen presence within. "And when it breaks, you will be free." The whisper came again, faint but certain. "Soon." In the throne room above, Sareth sat alone. The fleets had returned, the rebellion was over, and yet he knew the true war had only begun. The court of Balis had changed. Once, its vast marble hall had been the seat of unity, where the Empire's will was carried as one voice across the stars. Now, it was a chamber of factions. Whispers had become open defiance, loyalty measured not by rank, but by allegiance. The captains no longer knelt as one. They chose their bows carefully, some deep to Sareth, others subtly toward Kaelin. The Lord Commander felt the fracture in every council. It was a slow breaking thing, like ice shifting beneath the weight of a winter long endured. His authority still held, but each day it grew thinner. Kaelin stood at the center of the storm. He did not speak against Sareth, not openly, but every word he offered in council was a quiet undermining of the Lord Commander's caution. Where Sareth urged patience, Kaelin spoke of opportunity. Where Sareth warned of cost, Kaelin spoke of glory. The outer worlds need a stronger hand, Kaelin said, his voice smooth, calm. Rebellion will rise again unless we expand our patrol fleets. I am willing to lead them. Morwen's voice cut through the chamber like steel. You speak as though only you can save the Empire. Kaelin turned to the chaplain with faint amusement. I speak as though I will not stand idle while the Empire bleeds. The murmur in the court was immediate, half in Kaelin's favor, half in Morwen's. Sareth's hand rose for silence. The Empire will be defended, Sareth said, his voice low but firm, by all who serve it, not by one man's will alone. Kaelin bowed, though his eyes lingered on the throne longer than necessary. Outside the council, the court was no longer subtle. Captains and governors gathered in private chambers, pledging their loyalty to one side or the other. Some sought Kaelin's strength, others clung to Sareth's authority. The balance shifted daily, each new victory or rumor weighing the scale. In the training halls, whispers followed Morwen as he walked. The chaplain's reputation for vigilance made him respected, but it also made him feared. There were some who spoke of his faith as a weapon too sharp, one that could cut the Empire apart. In the archives, Lirin worked quietly. His hands traced the old records, piecing together fragments of history long buried. He read of ancient schisms, of empires that tore themselves apart not by war, but by division. The vault's whisper had grown louder, so loud he sometimes wondered if Kaelin could hear it as well. One evening, as the sun bled crimson over the spires of Balis, Sareth summoned Lirin and Morwen to the throne room. The Lord Commander's voice was weary, though not weak. The court bends, he said, not from pressure without, but from within. Kaelin's victories have made him the symbol of strength. My authority weakens each day I let him stand beside me. Morwen's voice was immediate. Then remove him. Strip his command before he strips yours. Sareth's eyes were shadowed. If I do, the court will fracture in an instant. Those loyal to him will see my hand as fear, not justice. They will not follow me, they will follow him. Lirin spoke softly. The balance cannot hold forever. One way or another, the court will choose, and the choice will not be gentle. Sareth looked toward the stained glass, the dying light casting the hall in blood-red shadows. Then perhaps I must be ready for the cost. In the great audience hall the next day, the fracture widened in public view. Kaelin entered flanked by his chosen captains. Several governors stood with him, their banners lowered in respect, but not to Sareth. My lord, Kaelin said, bowing. The outer worlds have sent word. They are loyal to the Empire, but they have requested that I personally oversee the defense of their sectors. They trust my leadership. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Sareth's reply was slow, deliberate. The defense of the Empire is not a matter of personal favor. It is a matter of command. Kalen inclined his head, but his voice was sharp enough for all to hear. And yet, loyalty is not commanded, my lord. It is earned. A ripple passed through the court. Some murmurs in approval, others in unease. Morwen stepped forward, his voice iron, and what is earned can be taken away. Kalen's eyes lingered on him, the faintest curve of a smile at his lips. Indeed, chaplain, we agree, at last. That night, the fortress spire was alive with movement. Messengers crossed the halls in silence. Captains met behind closed doors. The court was no longer divided quietly. It was dividing openly. Morwen moved through the shadows, his steps silent. He had begun to speak privately with those captains who still held to Sareth, warning them of the danger Kalen posed. Each conversation was careful, measured. The wrong word to the wrong ear could bring the entire effort to ruin. Laren, in the depths of the vault, felt the black steel door tremble harder than ever before. The runes flared bright, their glow sharp and angry. The whisper was almost a voice now. The chain is breaking. He closed his eyes, his voice low. Not yet. The reply was sharper, colder. Soon. In the throne room above, Sareth sat alone. The red thirst burned faintly in his veins, stronger than it had in years. It was not battle that fed it. It was the pressure of holding an empire on the edge of fracture. Outside the chamber, Kalen's shadow grew longer. The air in the fortress spire was heavier than Balis's dying sun. For months the court had whispered, schemed, shifted in loyalty. But now the divide could no longer hide behind ceremony. The spark came from the outer worlds. One of Kalen's pledged governors, Lord Vaeric of Calix, had refused an imperial tithe sent from Sareth's own hand. His message had been respectful in words, but the meaning was clear. We follow the Empire, but our loyalty is to Kalen. Sareth's council chamber fell to silence after the message was read aloud. They do not speak the Empire's language anymore, Morwen said, his voice sharp. They speak his. Kalen stood with calm precision, his expression unreadable. Lord Vaeric's loyalty has never faltered. His refusal is not rebellion, it is caution. Calix's harvest was halved this season. The tithe was more than they could spare. Sareth's gaze was fixed on him. And yet, Vaeric sends you tribute from the same harvest. A faint smile touched Kalen's lips. Loyalty takes many forms, my lord. Morwen's hand tightened on his crozius. Some forms wear the mask of treachery. The court's tension did not break in that chamber. It broke in the barracks. Two companies, one loyal to Sareth, one sworn to Kalen, met in the training yards after a routine drill. What began as a heated exchange of words became shoves, then drawn blades. By the time the fortress guard arrived, the ground was stained in crimson. 8 warriors lay dead, dozens wounded. The news reached the court within the hour. Sareth stood in the great hall as the captains gathered, their armor still marked from the clash. His voice was heavy with command. This ends now. The Empire cannot bleed itself dry while enemies wait beyond our borders. But Kalen stepped forward, his tone measured. The Empire bleeds because it is divided in spirit. My warriors will not stand by while they are treated as enemies for their loyalty. They are loyal to you, not the Empire, Morwen growled. They are loyal to victory, Kalen replied, his voice cutting the air. Something the Empire has forgotten how to win without me. The hall erupted in shouts, captains arguing openly, some standing with Kalen, others with Sareth. It was no longer a matter of whispers. That night, in the shadows of the chapel, Morwen knelt in silence. His voice was low, his prayer heavy. We are falling. The Empire cannot serve two masters. One will destroy the other, and the court will burn in the process. From the dark, Liren's voice came softly. You speak as though it is not already burning. The chaplain looked up sharply. Liren stepped forward, the dim light glinting against his pale face. Kaelin has set events in motion, the scholar said. Even Sareth's restraint cannot stop it now. The first blood has been drawn. There will be more. Morwen's jaw tightened. Then we prepare for the war to come. Kaelin moved through the lower halls of the fortress spire like a shadow. His chosen captains walked with him, their steps quiet but confident. They met with governors who had come in secret, pledging their fleets, their worlds, their loyalty, not to the Empire, but to him. You speak of reform, one governor said quietly, of a stronger empire, but reforms require a throne that will allow them. Kaelin's smile was faint, almost invisible. The throne will allow what the Empire demands. The governor's eyes lingered on him for a long moment. Then he bowed. In the upper halls, Sareth met with his remaining loyalists. The reports from the barracks had spread across Barlis. Civilian unrest had begun in the lower districts, citizens aligning themselves along the same fault line as the court. Morwen's voice was iron. If Kaelin's influence grows unchecked, the next clash will not be in the barracks. It will be in the streets. Liren's tone was calm, but his words were heavier still. It may already be too late to prevent that. The tide has shifted. Sareth's eyes narrowed. Then we hold the fortress. We hold the heart of the Empire, no matter what the outer worlds whisper. Morwen bowed his head in grim acknowledgement. The next day, the clash came. Again, this time not in the barracks. It began in the Grand Market, below the spire. A dispute between merchants loyal to opposing factions escalated into violence. By the time the fortress guard arrived, dozens of citizens had taken up arms, forming lines along factional banners. The streets burned before nightfall. From the spire, Sareth looked down at the city's chaos. His voice was quiet, almost to himself. This is no longer a court divided. This is an empire at war with itself. Morwen stood at his side. Then we must choose to fight as though it is war. That evening, Kaelin addressed his captains in the Great Hall. The Empire cannot be held by words alone, he said. Strength will decide its future. I will not strike at the Lord Commander, but neither will I allow my warriors to stand idle while they are attacked in the streets. We defend our own. There was no pretense in the way his captains bowed to him, not as a subordinate, but as a leader in his own right. In the vault below, the black steel door trembled violently. Liren stood before it, the runes glowing so bright, the air shimmered. His voice was low, his expression dark. The chain is breaking faster than I thought. The whisper came again, sharper than ever. The war will open the way. Liren closed his eyes, and if the way opens, the Empire will not survive it. In the throne room above, Sareth sat in silence. The red thirst burned in his veins, stronger than ever before. He could feel the moment approaching, the one choice that would define the Empire's fate. Outside the spire, Barlis burned. The map of the Crimson Imperium bled with fire. What began as scattered unrest had coalesced into a chain of coordinated uprisings. The outer worlds rose, not in isolated defiance, but in unison. Fleets turned their guns from alien raiders to imperial banners. governors who had sworn loyalty to Balis spoke now of reform under Kaelin's leadership. The council chamber was tense, each captain's armor reflecting the burning light of the holomap. "The rebellion spreads like rot," Morwen said. "And like rot, it spreads from within." His gaze slid to Kaelin. Kaelin's voice was steady, controlled. "You speak as though I command these uprisings. I do not. But I will not deny that the worlds rally to me because they trust my strength. If you wish to end the rebellion, let me lead them." Sareth's eyes narrowed. "You already lead them." The silence that followed was heavy. The fortress spire moved to a war footing. Legions of crimson-armored warriors marched through the streets of Balis, their banners casting long shadows across the city. Fleets were readied, their hulls gleaming in the fading light of the dying sun. But it was not just Sareth's banners flying from the warships. Some bore Kaelin's sigil, even within the Imperial Armada. Morwen met Sareth in the Ibu Strategy Hall. "Every order you give is carried by captains who speak Kaelin's name in the same breath as yours. If this continues, they will stop speaking yours at all." Sareth's voice was cold. "If Kaelin moves against me, he will have declared war on the Empire." Morwen's jaw tightened. "And if you move against him, half the Empire will see it as betrayal. Either path ends the same." The first coordinated strike came on the world of Athros. A garrison loyal to Sareth was surrounded by planetary defense forces swearing to Kaelin. The siege lasted a day before Kaelin's fleet arrived, not to strike the rebels, but to negotiate their terms. From the vigilant flame, Kaelin broadcast a message across Athros and the Empire alike. The Empire stands divided because its people are unheard. I come not to overthrow the throne, but to protect those who have been abandoned. The siege ended without bloodshed, but the garrison swore allegiance to Kaelin's command. On Balis, the report struck like a blade. "He has taken Athros without firing a shot," Morwen said, his voice heavy. "And every world sees it as a victory of his wisdom over your caution." Sareth stared at the holomap, watching Kaelin's influence expand like a spreading shadow. "He acts as a savior," he said quietly, "but he is building a kingdom of his own." The rebellion deepened on Veyrin. This time, Kaelin's arrival did not prevent bloodshed. The Imperial fleet, loyal to Sareth, moved to retake the orbital shipyards, only to be intercepted by Kaelin's forces. The two fleets stood arrayed across the void, their weapons primed, neither willing to fire the first shot. "Stand down," Kaelin ordered across the comms. "I will not destroy Imperial ships in the name of Imperial loyalty. Withdraw, and Veyrin will be pacified without needless loss." The Loyalist fleet commander hesitated. His officers urged caution. The people of Veyrin hailed Kaelin as their protector. By the time the Loyalist fleet withdrew, Veyrin's banners flew Kaelin's sigil alongside the blooded sun. In the fortress spire, the court erupted in open outrage. "This is treachery," cried one captain. "This is preservation," answered another. Sareth rose from the throne, his voice silencing the hall. "Kaelin has crossed the line. He acts as the Empire's voice without my command. If he continues, there will be no Empire, only his rule." The court split before his eyes. Half the captains bowed in agreement. The other half lowered their heads in silent defiance. And that night, Morwen confronted Sareth in the quiet of the command balcony. "You can no longer wait," the chaplain said. "Every day Kaelin's shadow grows. Every world he touches is one step closer to his rule. If you do not strike now, the throne will be his without a battle." Sareth's voice was low, If I strike now, the throne will be his, because the court will see me as a tyrant. The Empire's faith is already shaken. The wrong move will shatter it completely. Morwen's eyes hardened. The wrong move, maybe not moving at all. Far from Balis, Kaelin's fleet continued to pacify the rebellion. Calix fell next, its governor welcoming Kaelin personally. Across the Empire, Kaelin's image spread, warrior, savior, reformer. In his private chambers aboard the Vigilant Flame, Kaelin stood before a hollow of the Empire. His captains stood behind him in silence. "The Lord Commander will not act," Kaelin said. "And so we will. The Empire will not fall. It will be reborn." In the vault beneath the spire, Liraean felt the black steel door tremble like never before. The runes blazed with crimson light, as though feeding on the Empire's division. The whisper was a voice now, sharp and certain. "The war opens the way. Soon the chain will break." Liran's hands tightened on the ancient wards. "If the chain breaks, there will be nothing left to rule." The whisper came again, almost a laugh. "That is the point." In the throne room above, Sareth stared at the galaxy map. Kaelin's influence spread like a tide. Loyalist fleets were hemmed in, worlds balanced on the edge of defection. The Lord Commander's hands curled into fists. The red thirst whispered in his blood. It was time to choose. The war began without a declaration. It started in the shadowed orbit of the world of Veyrin, where loyalist fleets under Admiral Kareth moved to re-establish control of the shipyards. Kaelin's forces, already stationed in defense, intercepted them. For hours the fleets drifted in silence, the void tense with unspoken threat. Kaelin's voice broke it, transmitted to every loyalist ship. "I will not fire upon my brothers," he said, "but I will not yield Veyrin to a command that has abandoned it. Withdraw, and the Empire will remain whole." Admiral Kareth's reply was iron. "The Empire remains whole only under the Lord Commander. You are the one dividing it." There was no further warning. The first shot came from a loyalist cruiser, its broadside tearing through the flank of a Kaelinite frigate. In an instant, the void erupted into fire. From Balis, Sareth stood at the center of the holomap as reports came in. The battle was no skirmish. It was an engagement on a scale unseen since the great wars of expansion. Warships tore each other apart over Veyrin, their wrecks falling like burning stars to the planet below. Morwen's voice was grim. "It has begun. The Empire bleeds itself at last." Sareth's eyes were locked on the spreading crimson markers. "Then the war will be decided by who has the will to endure it." On the Vigilant Flame, Kaelin moved across the bridge with calm precision. "Form pincer on the Resolute. Dawn," he ordered, pointing toward the Loyalist flagship. "Disable their engines. Do not destroy them. We fight to break their command, not annihilate it." His captains obeyed without hesitation. Kaelin's fleet fought with disciplined precision, crippling Loyalist ships, forcing them to disengage rather than burning them to ruin. It was war, but a war staged to show restraint. Every victory crafted as proof of Kaelin's claim to be the Empire's savior, not its destroyer. Admiral Kareth was no fool. On the Resolute Dawn, he watched Kaelin's tactics unfold and knew what they meant. "He seeks to win the war without destroying the fleet," he told his officers. "Every ship that withdraws will one day sail under his banner." "Then we do not withdraw," one captain said. Kareth's eyes hardened. "We do not fall." The Loyalist fleet pressed harder, even as Kaelin's trap closed. On Balis, the court was in uproar. Reports of the battle filled the Grand Hall. Kaelin's faction argued that he was defending Imperial worlds from Sareth's overreach. Sareth's loyalists called it treason in open voice. Morwen stood at the center of the storm. Every hour we hesitate, Kaelin gains ground. The longer this battle drags, the more ships will defect to his side. Sareth's voice was heavy but unbroken. Then we send reinforcements. The loyal fleet will not stand alone. For the first time, Barlis's own defense fleet was ordered to war, not against an alien enemy, but against Kaelin. Chum in orbit over Veyrin, the tide shifted. Loyalist reinforcements translated into the system, their crimson hulls gleaming in the void. Kaelin's fleet adjusted formation, his voice steady over the comms. Reinforcements will not change the outcome. We fight for the same empire. Lay down your arms before more brothers die. The reply from the loyalist commander was cold. We fight for the true empire, and we will not bow. The battle intensified. Massive warships exchanged broadsides, their shields flaring under the pounding fire. Boarding actions began as strike cruisers rammed and locked hulls, warriors clashing in brutal corridors of steel. Kaelin strode through the command deck as the vigilant flame shuddered under impact. Report. Damage to decks 4 and 5, shields holding at 70%, a lieutenant replied. Kaelin's eyes narrowed at the display. Signal the Iron Vow. Break their starboard line and force the resolute Dawn to disengage. The maneuver worked. Under concentrated fire, the Loyalist flagship began to break formation, its escorts falling back to cover its retreat. From Barlis, Sareth watched the holomap update. The Loyalist fleet was losing ground. Morwen turned to him, voice sharp. If we lose Veyrin, we lose the gateway to the outer worlds. Sareth's jaw tightened. The red thirst burned, faintly in his blood. Then we do not lose Veyrin. On the resolute Dawn, Admiral Kareth gave the order no commander wished to give. Signal withdrawal. Save what remains of the fleet. We will regroup at Barlis. Kaelin's fleet did not pursue. His voice carried across the comms once more. The battle is over. The Empire remains. Return to your worlds in peace. The Loyalist fleet limped from the system, battered but alive. The news struck Barlis like a storm. The first battle between Sareth and Kaelin had ended, and Kaelin had won. The outer worlds hailed him as their protector. Even on Barlis, whispers spread that perhaps Kaelin's vision was the stronger one. In the throne room, Sareth stood before the court, the weight of defeat heavy on the air. Morwen's voice was low but iron. This was only the first battle. The war has just begun. Sareth's eyes were cold as steel. Then we will fight it to the end. In the vault below, the black steel door pulsed with crimson light. The whisper was a voice now, clear and certain. The war tears the Empire apart. The chain will break. Liren's voice was quiet in the darkness. If it breaks, there will be nothing left to rule. The whisper replied with a chill certainty. That is already true. Far from Barlis, aboard the vigilant flame, Kaelin stood in silence, gazing at the map of the Empire. One battle had been won, but he knew Sareth would not yield. The war ahead would decide not only who ruled the Empire, but if it could survive at all. The war did not pause after Veyrin. It spread like fire through dry forests, system to system, world to world. What had begun as a single confrontation now became a web of battles stretching across the Crimson Imperium. Kaelin's fleets moved with precision. Each victory was swift, decisive, and calculated to avoid needless destruction. His enemies withdrew more often than they fell, their banners lowered, but their ships intact. Each retreat fed his legend, Kaelin the Unifier, Kaelin the Protector. Sareth saw the truth behind the victories. They were not unity, they were conquest, wearing the mask of preservation. In the fortress spire, the strategy hall was crowded with officers returning from broken fronts. The holomap showed Kaelin's influence spreading like a crimson tide. Morwen stood with arms crossed, his expression grim. Every world Kaelin touches becomes his. Whether they bow willingly or by force, they bow. Sareth's voice was low, measured. Then we strike where he does not expect. We cannot meet him in every system, but we can strike at his supply lines, force his fleets to bleed. Liren's voice came from the shadowed corner of the hall. Even if you bleed his fleets, his reputation grows stronger. The Empire loves the man who seems invincible. Every defeat you hand him becomes a mark of your desperation. Sareth's eyes narrowed. Better desperation than surrender. The first counterstrike came at the Raylos Belt. Sareth's loyalist fleet descended on Kaelin's convoys, shattering supply ships and scattering escorts. It was the first loyalist victory since the war began, but the cost was high. Civilian transports loyal to Kaelin were caught in the crossfire. Across the Empire, the images spread. Burning ships, shattered hulls. Refugees adrift in the void. Kaelin's voice carried across the Empire. The Loyalists burn their own citizens to strike at me. This is not the defense of the Empire. It is its destruction. On Bales, the court felt the shift. Some who had wavered toward Sareth now leaned toward Kaelin. Kaelin struck back at Calith Prime. The world's garrison, loyal to Sareth, refused his calls to surrender. Kaelin's fleet descended, his troops landing in disciplined formations. The siege was brutal. Kaelin's restraint fraying as resistance stiffened. On the third day, the fortress fell. Kaelin walked the halls himself, the bodies of Sareth's soldiers lying silent around him. He ordered the wounded treated, both sides, but the victory felt different. For the first time, his captains saw a shadow of what this war was becoming. On Bales, Sareth received the report of Calith's fall in silence. Morwen slammed his gauntleted fist onto the table. Every victory strengthens his claim. Every world lost makes you look weaker. Sareth's eyes burned faintly red in the low light. I will not match him in ambition. I will outlast him in resolve. The war pressed into the Corwood systems. Kaelin's fleet struck at the twin worlds of Miris and Halkor. Sareth moved his forces to intercept, leading the campaign personally. For 3 weeks, the war raged across the twin worlds. Space battles above, ground campaigns below. Entire cities were reduced to rubble. The skies burned with the light of orbital bombardment. On the plains of Halkor, Sareth stood amidst the wreckage of a destroyed loyalist outpost. The red thirst whispered to him, its hunger stronger than ever. He forced it down, his voice steel as he addressed his soldiers. This war is not for glory. It is for the survival of the Empire. We will hold Halkor, no matter the cost. Kaelin's forces struck hard at Miris. From the vigilant flame, Kaelin coordinated a planetary assault, driving loyalist defenders back toward the capital spire. His voice carried over the comms to his warriors. Strike swift, strike clean. We fight brothers, not enemies, but we cannot allow Miris to fall into ruin. The battle lasted 6 more days. Miris fell. The twin campaigns ended with Halkor holding under Sareth, Miris falling to Kaelin. The war map showed no decisive victor, only a deeper fracture. On Balis, the court was quieter than it had been in months. The reality had set in. This was not a short war. Morwen stood before Sareth, his voice low. Every world we hold costs more lives. Every world we lose strengthens Kaelin's cause. The people are tired. The Empire bleeds faster than we can heal it. Sareth's eyes darkened. Then we bleed until the truth stands clear. In the vault below, Liren's hand rested on the black steel door. The runes blazed now, the air around them sharp with power. The war opens the way, the whisper said. The chain will break. Liren's voice was tight. The chain will break, yes. But if it breaks now, there will be nothing left to bind. The whisper came cold and final. That is the nature of endings. Far from Balis, aboard the vigilant flame, Kaelin stood alone in his quarters. The victories should have felt like triumph, but the cost weighed heavier each day. His fleets were stretched thin, his soldiers weary. The Empire was fracturing, and with each world claimed, he wondered if there would be an empire left to save. The war had burned for months without pause. The map of the Crimson Imperium was a scar of contested worlds, Kaelin's banners pressing deeper toward the core. Each victory widened the fracture. Each defeat for Sareth cut closer to the heart of Balis itself. On the vigilant flame, Kaelin studied the war front. His fleets had taken Myris, Calith, and Athros. Now the coreward systems of Velkara and Dresmir lay exposed. If we secure Velkara, Kaelin told his captains, the corridor to Balis will open. The war will end before the year's turning. In the fortress spire, the council was grim. Reports from the outer defences came in hourly. Loyalist fleets fell back system by system. Refugees crowded Balis' lower districts, their stories fueling unrest within the capital. Morwen stood at Sareth's side, voice low but steady. We can no longer hold every front. Kaelin strikes where we are weakest, and we cannot match his speed. Sareth's gaze was cold on the war map. Then we will make the core our fortress. We will force him to strike where we are strongest. The loyalist fleets withdrew from the outermost core systems, consolidating at Velkara. It was a calculated move, abandoning ground in order to make a stand. But to Kaelin's forces, it appeared as weakness. His captains urged a swift strike. From the vigilant flame, Kaelin gave the order. We press the advantage. Velkara will fall before they can fortify. We will take it without hesitation. The Battle of Velkara began in the void. Kaelin's fleet translated into the system in perfect formation, its crimson hulls gleaming in the pale light of Velkara's dying star. The Loyalist fleet, under Admiral Varric, stood arrayed in defense. The comms opened. Varric's voice was steady. Kaelin, you need not do this. There is still time to stand down. Kaelin's reply was measured. I will not stand down while the Empire bleeds. Withdraw, and no more blood will be shed here today. The silence that followed was brief. The first shots came from the Loyalist line. The void erupted into battle. Massive capital ships exchanged broadsides, their shields flaring under the pounding impacts. Strike craft darted through the chaos, unleashing torpedoes that lit the dark like lightning. On the vigilant flame, Kaelin moved across the bridge with calm precision. Break their left flank, force their heavy cruisers toward the planetary gravity well. We'll collapse their formation piece by piece. His fleet obeyed, pressing the Loyalists back toward Velkara itself. On Balis, the holomap lit with battle data. Morwen watched the markers shift. Velkara is holding, for now. But Kaelin's fleet moves like a blade. If he breaks their line, the core will be open. Sareth's voice was like steel. Then we hold Velkara no matter the cost. Prepare the second fleet for translation. I will lead them myself. The battle raged for 3 days. On the third, Sareth's reinforcements arrived. Barlis's second fleet, crimson hulls flaring as they cut into Kaelin's flank. From the vigilant flame, Kaelin watched the new formation enter the field. His voice was low but certain. So, the Lord Commander comes at last. The battle shifted into brutal close-quarters fighting. Kaelin's fleet pressed hard, but the Loyalists fought with desperate resolve. Boarding actions tore through both flagships, warriors clashing in steel corridors lit only by emergency beacons. On the deck of the Resolute Dawn, Sareth himself strode into battle, his crimson blade cutting through Kaelinite warriors with relentless precision. The red thirst burned in his veins, whispering for more. He forced it down, his voice cold as he ordered his forces forward. In the void above Velkara, the battle reached its peak. Neither side broke. Kaelin's fleets were forced to withdraw under sustained pressure, but not destroyed. Velkara held, but at staggering cost. From the Resolute Dawn, Sareth addressed the court on Barlis. Velkara stands, the Empire endures, but the war is far from over. Beyond the vigilant flame, Kaelin stood silent in his quarters. Velkara had not fallen, but neither had his forces been shattered. His captains spoke of regrouping, of striking elsewhere. Kaelin's voice was quiet, almost to himself. The Lord Commander will not yield. Then we will meet him where this war must end, at Barlis. In the vault beneath the fortress spire, Lirin felt the black steel door tremble violently. The runes blazed crimson, the air thick with heat. The war reaches its peak, the whisper said. The chain will break. Lirin's voice was heavy. If the chain breaks now, it will take Barlis with it, the whisper replied, almost amused. So it was always meant to. Above, Sareth stood at the highest balcony of the fortress spire, looking out over the burning sky. The war had reached its peak, and soon the decisive battle would come. The war had burned across 100 systems. Now it burned at the gates of the core. Kaelin's victories at Myris, Athros, and the Raylos Belt had carved a path toward Balis. Velkara had held, but barely. Now his fleets gathered at Dresmir, the final bastion before the capital itself. From the vigilant flame, Kaelin stood over the holomap. The core systems were outlined in crimson. Dresmir was the last lock on the door. When Dresmir falls, Kaelin told his captains, Barlis will stand alone. The war will end there. On Barlis, the atmosphere was iron. The fortress spire had shifted to full wartime command. The city's walls were fortified, orbital defenses brought online, civilian districts evacuated to the lower tiers. Morwen moved through the War Council with steady precision. The people know the war comes here. They are afraid, but they will stand. Sareth's gaze lingered on the war map. Dresmir was already under siege. His voice was calm, but the weight beneath it was unmissable. Then we make Barlis ready. This will be the heart of the Empire's last stand. At Dresmir, the battle began in orbit. Kaelin's fleets translated into the system in disciplined formation, crimson banners stark against the pale light of the twin moons. Loyalist defenses under Admiral Solvar stood ready, heavy fortifications orbiting the world like a crown of steel. The comms opened. Solvar's voice was iron. Kaelin, turn back. Dresmir will not fall. Kaelin's reply was measured, resolute. Dresmir need not fall, Solvar. Lay down your arms, and your people will be spared. Solvar gave no answer, but silence. The first salvos lit the void. The siege of Dresmir was brutal. Kaelin's fleet struck in waves, testing the defences, drawing out the loyalist formations. Boarding actions erupted across the outer ring stations. Loyalist and Kaelinite warriors clashed in steel corridors, the air thick with smoke and the stench of promethium. Kaelin moved across the Vigilant Flames bridge, each order precise. Press their flank, target the Iron Crown's engines, keep their defense line fractured. After 5 days, Dresmir's orbital defenses began to buckle. On Balis, the council received the news. Morwen's voice was low. Dresmir will not hold. Sareth's jaw tightened, his gaze never leaving the holomap. Then Kaelin comes here. Balis will stand. It must. On the 6th day, Dresmir's final defense station fell. Admiral Solvar ordered his surviving ships to retreat toward Balis. Kaelin's fleets did not pursue far. His voice carried across the system. The war will end at Balis. Let it end swiftly. The capital prepared. On the upper tiers of Balis, heavy artillery lined the walls. Great planetary defense batteries aimed toward the sky. In orbit, the loyalist fleets formed a final cordon around the world. In the streets, soldiers marched in disciplined ranks, crimson armor glinting beneath the shadow of the spire. Civilians were moved to the fortified lower tiers, the air thick with tension. Morwen oversaw the evacuation. His voice to the people was steady. The Empire endures because you endure. Stand firm, for Balis is the heart of us all. In the vault beneath the fortress spire, Lirin stood before the black steel door. The runes blazed crimson, the heat in the air like a living thing. The war reaches its end, the whisper said. The chain will break. Lirin's voice was cold. If the chain breaks now, the capital will burn. The whisper replied with a hiss, so it was always meant to. From the highest balcony of the spire, Sareth looked out over the city. The skies above Balis burned with the light of defense grids charging, fleets maneuvering into position. Morwen joined him, silent for a time. Then he spoke. When Kaelin comes, there will be no turning back. Sareth's voice was quiet, almost reflective. There was no turning back the moment this war began. Far from Balis, aboard the Vigilant Flame, Kaelin stood at the viewport. His fleets gathered, their numbers vast, their banners bright in the void. His voice to his captains was measured but certain. Balis is the heart of the Empire. We take it, or the Empire dies. The fleets set course for the capital. On Balis, the alarms began to sound. Kaelin's forces were inbound. The war would end here. The void above Balis burned. Kaelin's fleets emerged from the warp like a crimson tide, ship after ship sliding into formation. Massive capital vessels, fortresses in the void, led the assault, flanked by squadrons of cruisers and strike craft. In the fortress spire, the war alarms echoed like a heartbeat. Sareth stood at the war table, the glowing map of the system before him. Each crimson marker was a blade drawn toward the heart. Morwen's voice was steady, though the tension in it was unmissable. Kaelin has committed his full strength. There will be no retreat this time. Sareth's gaze was locked on the approaching fleets. Then neither will we. In orbit, the loyalist fleets formed their defensive cordon. Admiral Varric, commanding from the Resolute Dawn, addressed his captains. This is Balis. This is the heart of the Empire. You will hold until your ships burn to nothing, or until Kaelin's are ash in the void. The loyalist formations moved into position, the sky above Balis, a net of steel. Kaelin's voice carried across the comms to his fleets. This is the last battle. Take Balis, and the war ends. Remember, every shot we fire is not to destroy the Empire, but to save it. Strike clean, strike true. The first salvos lit the void. The siege of Balis began in orbit. Kaelin's fleet advanced in disciplined waves, their fire coordinated with surgical precision. Loyalist ships returned fire, the sky alive with blazing beams and the white flare of torpedoes. On the vigilant flame, Kaelin moved across the bridge, his voice cutting through the din of battle. Press the western flank. Force the Iron Crown back toward the planetary defense grid. Open a path to the inner ring. The Iron Crown, under Admiral Solvar, held the line. The Loyalist flagship burned under sustained fire, but refused to break. Solvar's voice to his crew was iron. Hold them here. If the line breaks, the planet burns. Every minute bought in the void meant more time for Balis's defenses to prepare. On the surface, Balis was braced for war. Planetary defense batteries roared, lances of energy streaking toward the void. Anti-orbital cannons in the upper tiers of the city locked onto Kaelinite ships that broke the defensive net. In the streets, crimson-armored soldiers moved into their positions. Morwen strode along the lines, his voice carrying over the roar of the batteries. Balis stands because you stand. Hold fast. On the vigilant flame, Kaelin's eyes narrowed at the resistance. His fleets were making ground, but slower than expected. The Loyalists fought with desperate precision, their formations refusing to collapse. Commit the Shadow Wing, Kaelin ordered. A formation of fast strike craft peeled off from the main fleet, darting toward the planetary defense platforms. In the fortress spire, Sareth received the report. Morwen's voice was sharp. They're targeting the outer defense batteries. If those fall, the orbital line will collapse. Sareth's jaw tightened. Then we hold them. Send the Black Guard to reinforce the northern platforms. Kaelin will not take this world without paying for every step. Above Balis, the battle shifted as Kaelin's Shadow Wing struck the defense platforms. Loyalist gunners fought from within, the sky alive with explosions as platforms burned or went dark. On the vigilant flame, Kaelin gave the next order. Bring the Vigil's spear into the gap. Press the breach before they can regroup. The Loyalist line buckled. Admiral Varric's voice over the comms was calm, despite the chaos. Fall back to the inner ring. We hold the inner defense, or we hold nothing at all. The fleets pulled back toward Balis, the fight shifting closer to the planet. On the surface, the first signs of Kaelin's descent began. Dropships broke atmosphere, their hulls glowing red as they tore through the skies. Loyalist ground defenses opened fire, streaks of energy and flak tearing through the air. Some dropships burned before reaching the ground. Others landed in bursts of dust and steel. Kaelinite warriors poured into the upper tiers of Balis, the siege shifting from void to city. In the streets, the first clashes erupted. Crimson-armored soldiers fought their brothers in brutal close combat. The avenues of the upper tiers became killing grounds. Every barricade a fortress, every plaza a battlefield. Morwen fought at the front lines, his blade cutting through Kaelinite warriors as he drove his troops to hold the gates. In the fortress spire, Sareth watched from the high balcony as the city burned. His voice was quiet but heavy. It begins. Balis will not fall while I still stand. Far above, Kaelin's fleets pressed closer, the vigilant flame moving toward planetary orbit. The final battle had begun. Balis burned. From the highest spires to the deepest tiers, the city roared with the fury of battle. The skies were blackened by the smoke of burning ships and the fire of defense batteries. The air carried the constant tremor of orbital bombardment. Kaelin's forces had broken through the outer defenses. His fleets moved into close orbit, their guns striking precise blows at key strongholds. Dropships descended in waves, disgorging crimson-armored warriors into the upper tiers of the city. In the fortress spire, Sareth stood at the war table, the city's defensive grid flickering in crimson and gold. Each flash of red was another sector under attack. Morwen's voice was sharp. The upper tiers are collapsing. We can't hold the outer walls much longer. Sareth's eyes narrowed, the weight of the war heavy on his shoulders. Then we hold the inner gates. Balis will not break while I still stand. In the streets of the upper tiers, the battle was chaos. Kaelinite warriors surged forward, disciplined formations advancing street by street. Loyalist defenders fought from behind barricades of steel and shattered masonry, every avenue turning into a killing field. Morwen led the Black Guard at the northern gate, his blade cutting down Kaelinite champions in brutal combat. "Hold the line!" he roared, his voice carrying over the clash of steel and the roar of heavy guns. For every Kaelinite squad broken, 2 more pressed forward. Above, in orbit, Kaelin watched from the vigilant flame. His fleets had control of the skies, but Balis fought like a wounded beast. Every block of the city was a fortress. Kaelin's voice to his captains was measured. Do not waste lives on needless slaughter. Press the assault where the lines are weakest. Drive them toward the spire. His goal was not annihilation. It was decisive victory. In the mid-tier districts, civilian evacuations had slowed. The lower tiers were packed, the air thick with fear. The roar of battle above echoed like a storm beneath the earth. Liren moved through the lower vaults, his hand brushing the black steel door. The runes pulsed with a deep crimson light, the heat in the air almost unbearable. "The chain will break," the whisper said. "This is the hour of ending." Liren's voice was taut. If the chain breaks now, the city falls. The empire ends. The whisper's reply was cold. The empire was ending long before today. The battle pressed closer to the heart of Balis. Kaelin's forces advanced through the mid-tiers, their banners visible from the walls of the fortress spire. Loyalist artillery pounded the approaches, entire avenues collapsing into rubble. In the War Council, reports came in, one after another. Morwen's voice was hard. The mid-tiers will not hold until nightfall. Sareth's gaze turned toward the map, then toward the balcony beyond. He could see the fires consuming the city. Then we prepare the inner defenses. Kaelin will not take the spire while I draw breath. In the streets below, Kaelinite warriors clashed with the Black Guard. Morwen fought with a fury born of loyalty, his crimson armor blackened with ash and blood. One of his captains called out over the din, "Lord Morwen, the mid-tiers are collapsing. We have to fall back." Morwen's reply was steel. "Then we fall back, but we do not break. The Lord Commander waits at the spire." Above the city, the vigilant flame moved into position directly over the fortress spire. Kaelin's gaze was fixed on the towering structure, the heart of Balis, the heart of the Empire. To his captains, he gave the final order. The outer defenses are gone. The inner gates will fall. Ready the assault teams. I will lead the final advance myself. In the fortress spire, Sareth stood in the hall of the Crimson Throne. The echoes of battle shook the walls, dust falling from the vaulted ceilings. Morwen entered, his armor scarred, his blade still wet with battle. The outer gates are gone. The enemy is at the steps of the spire. Sareth's voice was calm, but every word carried weight. Then the war ends here. Prepare the final defense. In the city below, Kaelin's forces gathered at the foot of the spire. The great gates loomed ahead, their surface scarred by the siege. Kaelin stepped forward, his voice carrying over the roar of battle. Baalis, the Empire does not need to die here. Lay down your arms, and the war ends tonight. The reply came not in words, but in the thunder of the spire's guns. Kaelin drew his blade. To the gates, he commanded. The siege of the fortress spire began. The gates of the fortress spire shuddered under the impact of Kaelin's siege weapons. For hours the great crimson doors had withstood fire, steel, and the roar of Kaelinite engines. Now, under the relentless assault, their surface cracked. From the hall of the Crimson Throne, Sareth stood listening to the distant thunder. Each impact echoed through the ancient stone, carrying the war closer. Morwen knelt before him, armor scarred, voice steady despite the roar beyond the gates. My lord, the final line is breaking. We can still fall back, regroup deeper within the spire. Sareth raised a hand, silencing him. His gaze was fixed on the great doors at the far end of the hall. There will be no retreat. The Empire ends here, or it endures here. There is no third path. The gates gave way. With a final roar, the doors burst inward, crimson dust filling the air as Kaelin's warriors surged into the great hall. Their boots rang against the ancient stone, the banners of the Empire swaying in the shockwave of the breach. At their head, Kaelin stepped forward, his crimson blade in hand, his gaze fixed on the throne at the far end. Sareth stood to meet him. The two warriors faced each other across the length of the hall. For a moment, the battle outside seemed to fade, the clash of armies dimming, the smoke hanging silent in the air. Kaelin's voice was quiet, but carried to every corner of the chamber. It does not have to end this way, Sareth. Lay down your arms. End this war before there is nothing left to rule. Sareth's gaze was steady, his hand resting on the hilt of his blade. You speak as though this war began without you. You have brought it to my gates, Kaelin. You have burned the Empire to save it. Kaelin's expression tightened. I did what was necessary. You would have watched it rot from within. Sareth's voice was colder now. Better rot than the fire you have lit. The silence broke as both drew their blades. The clash rang through the hall, steel on steel, each strike heavy with the weight of years of loyalty and betrayal. Kaelin fought with precision, every movement measured. Sareth's strikes were fierce, driven by the force of unyielding conviction. Around them, their warriors clashed in brutal combat. Morwen held the loyalist flank, his blade cutting down Kaelinite champions. Kaelin's captains pressed forward, the battle inside the spire as fierce as the war outside. The two warriors fought their way toward the steps of the Crimson Throne. Kaelin's voice was strained now. End this, Sareth. There is still a path where Baalis survives. Sareth's reply was a roar as his blade struck sparks from Kaelin's. The Baalis that survives under you will not be the Baalis I swore to defend. And the fight grew desperate. Kaelin's precision began to drive Sareth back, each strike pressing him toward the base of the throne. Sareth's blade caught Kaelin's with a ring of steel, but the force behind each blow was waning. Morwen saw it, his voice shouting over the din. "Lord Commander!" But the tide of battle held him back, loyalists and Kaelinites locked in deadly combat around him. At the final steps of the throne, Kaelin's blade slipped past Sareth's guard. The strike cut deep, not fatal, but enough to bring Sareth to one knee. Kaelin stood over him, his blade poised for the final blow. The hall fell silent, every warrior watching. Sareth looked up at him, defiance in his gaze. "If you take Balis by my death, Kaelin, know that you will inherit nothing but ashes." Kaelin's blade hovered for a moment. His breath was steady, his voice quiet. "Then I will rebuild from the ashes." He struck. Sareth fell. The Lord Commander's blade slipped from his hand, clattering against the crimson stone. The banners of the Empire swayed in the sudden stillness. Kaelin stood over him, breathing heavy, his blade lowered. The hall was silent, but for the sound of the battle outside beginning to fade. Morwen, bloodied but standing, moved toward the fallen throne. His gaze met Kaelin's. "You have won the war, but you have killed the heart of the Empire to do it." Kaelin's voice was quiet. The heart was already broken. Outside, the city of Balis was still burning. The Kaelinite banners were raised over the fortress spire, but the air carried no cheer of victory, only the silence of exhaustion, of loss, of a war that had ended in ruin. In the lower tiers, the people waited for word. The war was over, but at a cost they could not yet measure. And in the vault beneath the spire, the black steel door was silent at last. The runes were dark, the heat gone from the air. Lirin stood before it, his voice barely above a whisper. The chain did not break. The whisper came faintly, almost like a memory. "Not today, but the day will come." Above, in the highest balcony of the spire, Kaelin stood alone. The war was won. The Empire was his. And yet, as he looked out over the burning city, there was no triumph. Only the heavy weight of what had been lost. The Crimson Imperium had survived, but it would never be the same.